What is up, math superstars? If you're watching this video is all about frequently missed questions on the Math 6 SOL test. And so in this, we're going to be covering some different questions. So the way this works is that I'm going to read the question to you. You can pause it, solve it on your own, and then listen to the explanation of the question. So here we have this question. Which number is equivalent to the ratio 8/5? And then we have four options here. So go ahead and pause it, try something on your own, and then let's restart it together. So after you try this on your own, you realize that 8/5 is greater than 1. And so it gives us a little clue at the top. And so let's go and see which one of these numbers is bigger than 1. And so let's take a look at letter A. Letter A, you notice that there is a 0 in the ones place, so we can cross that one out. We can also say the same thing for letter C. There's a 0 in the ones place. And then you have 6.25%. That's the same as the decimal 0.0625. And so we know that that is not even close, and so we're left with one number, which is 160%. This number is actually bigger than 1. If we wrote 160% as a decimal, it'd be 1.6. We can also write this as a fraction 1 3/5, which is the same as writing 8/5. If I was going to write that as a mixed number, I can write that as 1 3/5, and so we can see a match right there. So let's figure out which statement is true here. And so we're given these four statements. Let's go over each one of these and see which one is true. And so we have letter A, 2/5 is equal to 4/100. And so 2/5, let's go ahead and make that into a decimal. That's the same as the decimal 0.4. And so these numbers are not the same. Let's go ahead and look at letter B. So we have 175%. So let's go ahead and make that into a fraction. That's the same as 1/75/100. And then we can simplify that to 1 3/4. And if we're trying to figure out what this improper fraction is, the improper fraction is 1 3/4. And so we can say that letter B is true, but let's look at the other ones here. So for letter C, we have 3 1/5. That is not the same as 3 2/10%. Anytime you have that percent sign at the end, if that percent is less than 100, it's just going to be a fraction, so without a whole number. So we can say that that's not true. And then we can also say that D is not true as well. 58% as a decimal, 0 58/100ths, and we can tell that that is not the same as well. And so here we're going to be dealing with multiplying fractions here. So we have two fractions, and let's go ahead and multiply them. We have 1 1/3 times 7/10. And so when we multiply fractions, we need to make our mixed number improper first. So we can say that's the same thing as 1 1/3 is the same as 4/3 times 7/10. And then all we do is we multiply across. So 4 times 7 is 28. 3 times 10 is 30. And then we can simplify that down. So if we divide the top and bottom by 2 to start, so we can say that's the same as 14/15 in simplest form. So now we have this problem. The length of the rope is 28 3/8 feet. James cuts 2 3/4 feet from this length of rope to use on a project. Exactly what length of rope remained unused? And so here we have a subtraction problem. So let's go ahead and set up our subtraction. We're going to be subtracting these two fractions. And our first step in subtraction is we need to make common denominators. And so our common denominator is going to be 8 for both fractions. So you can see is in showing my work, I'm rewriting these fractions. And so 21 3/8 stays the same. 3/4 is the same as 6/8. We're going to subtract these, but we notice that 3 minus 6 we can't do, so what we have to do is we have to borrow from the whole here. So we're going to borrow one whole from 21 to make it 20, and then 3/8, what we're going to do is we're going to add 8 to 3 to get us 11/8. So we have 20 and 11/8 minus 2 and 6/8. Now we can go ahead and subtract that. So we have 20 minus 2 is 18. And then 11/8 minus 6/8 is 5/8. And so we can say that the answer to this problem is 18 5/8 feet remains unused. So we have this question. Each 1/2 cup of milk has 4 grams of protein. Exactly how many grams of protein are in 3 1/2 cups of milk? And so the way we can figure this out is let's figure out how many half a cups there are in 3 1/2. And so what we can do is we can make this an improper fraction. And so we can say that 3 1/2 is the same as 7 halves. And so we can say that 1/2 has 4 grams. So that means 7 halves for this cups of milk. What we do is we're going to multiply 7 times 4, because each half has 4 grams. So we're going to multiply all 7 halves by 4 to give us 28 total grams of milk. And so we can say that the correct answer is D. You might fall in the trap of doing 3 1/2 times 4 to get there. But in order to do this properly, you would have to say that 1 cup of milk is the same as 8 grams. And then you can go ahead, because then you can multiply 8 grams by 3 1/2 cups. But this 1/2 cup is the tricky part of this problem. So you either can figure out how many halves there are and then go to multiply that by 4, or figure out how many grams of protein are in 1 cup and then go ahead and multiply that by 3 1/2. So a circular plate has a diameter of 11 inches. So let's go ahead and write some key information down. The diameter is 11 inches. Which is closest to the area of the plate? And so for these types of problems, common mistake is using the diameter instead of radius. And so we can figure out the radius to be half of the diameter, which is the same as 5.5 inches. And let's go ahead and use our area equation. Area equals pi times radius squared. And so in order to do this problem, we can do radius squared. So 5.5 squared times 3.14 to figure out the area. So when we do 5.5 squared, it comes out to 30 and 25/100ths times 3.14. So we'll use that estimate for pi there. So it gives us an area of about 94.98 inches squared. And the closest, because it says which is the closest to that, gives us letter C. If for some reason you got letter B, that is because you didn't square this, or you used the diameter to instead of your radius. And so it's real careful work is to use the area. Make sure you're using radius squared in the equation. So for this question, it says create a list of angle measures that could represent 4 angle measures of a quadrilateral. And so all four of these needs to equal 360 degrees. And so when you're doing this, you could easily write 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, and 90 degrees. And so when I add up all 4 of these, they all equal 360 degrees. So of course there's lots of different combinations. You can do 100 degrees, and 100 degrees is 200. And then you can also do 80 and 80. And so there's a lot of different combinations here. And so here, Mr. Walker surveyed 24 students. He asked each student to rate a TV show. The results are shown in this circle graph. So what fraction of the students best represents those who rated the show as above average? And so let's look at this piece right here for above average. This above average piece. And so we have these 4 options here. Let's go ahead and get rid of 2 of these. So we can get rid of 3/4. 3/4, if I'm going to draw that out, that covers way more than this piece right here. So we're looking for something, we know that this is going to be less than 1/2 here. And so for 2/3, if we were to draw out 2/3, it's over 1/2. So here we have 1/5 and 1/3. If I was going to draw out the third pieces, we're getting really close at above average. But if I'm going to draw out 5th pieces here, so you can see 1/5 is about that size, and we have a much bigger piece here. So I'm going to go with 1/3. So here for this question, you have 12 students answered a question that had answer choices labeled as A, B, C, and D. This circle graph represents choices selected by 12 students. And so if we're going to label these in order, we have letter A is the biggest piece, B is the second biggest, C is the third biggest, and D is the 4th biggest. And so we know that A has the most, B should be half of A. And then we have C, and so C looks like it's double the size of D. So it'd be 2 times the size of D, with D being the smallest. So let's go and remember that information here, and let's go to the next screen. And so it says which of these sets of data, which of these represent the data shown in the circle graph? And so let's use our key here. Each dot represents 2 students. And so right off the bat, we notice something about choice A. So if each one represents 2 students, so we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 right off the bat, we know that there's only 12 students that are surveyed. So let's cross out A, and we can do the same thing for D, because D looks like we have lots of dots here and it doesn't even come out right. And so here we have 2 choices left. And so if we look at choice B here, choice B, we notice something that C and D are exactly the same. And so in our graph that we had before, C was almost double of D. So we can cross out C just by looking at these, just looking at the circles there. So of course the only option that we have left here is B. And so we have A is the biggest piece. B, we remember that B is about half. So here is about half, so it looks about right. And we notice that C is double of D, and so we can also see that piece there too. So the number of cookies that were made at a bakery for each 7 days are shown. So day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and day 7. The best measure of center to use for this data is, and we have these 4 options here. So in any time we're looking at data, we need to figure out, first step, are there outliers? So with outliers, this is the number that's really high or really low in the data. So we have 100, 96, 96, 84, 108. We have 240, which sticks out to me, and 84. And so if I identify the outlier, that means I'm going to be talking about median. Median has the outlier. So let's figure out which one of our choices works. So let's go ahead and figure out, we have mean, median, and median. So let's go cross out the two ones that have mean in it, because those are going to be no good. And so we're left with letter B and letter D. So B says median because all the values are close to one another. D says median because 240 is much higher than the other numbers in the data. And since I figured out that I have an outlier, the much higher one, you need to make sure that you circle the one that actually says median, which would be D for this problem. So here we have this question. It says there are 6, so I'm going to underline key things here. There are 6 classic rock CDs, 2 jazz CDs, and 5 country CDs in a bin. Our friend Tegan will randomly select a CD, give it to her brother, and then randomly select another CD. So which of these can be used to find the probability that Tegan will select a jazz CD? So we stop there for jazz. So we notice that there are 13 total CDs, and there are only 2 jazz. And anytime we deal with probability, we're multiplying fractions. So there's jazz, and that one's going to be given away. So we're taking that away as our first selection. And then a country CD is her second selection. So we have 5 there. But since we took away the jazz CD, there's only 12 CDs left. So let's figure out which one of these matches. So letter A, we notice that our denominators are the same. So cross that out. B is addition, and D is addition. So we're only left with one option, which is going to be C. So we have this table shows drink and dessert selections at a party. Our friend Kayla will randomly select one drink and one dessert from the list. What's the probability that Kayla will select water and apple pie? And so we notice that in our drink selections, there's only one water. And so one water, the probability of selecting water would be 1/4 times, and then apple pie, there's only 2 dessert options, chocolate cake or apple pie. So that's going to be 1/2. And when we go ahead and multiply these two together, the probability that she'll select water and apple pie is 1/8. And so we just make sure that we identify the correct letter. So here we're given this, it says which graph best represents the inequality. -5 is less than or equal to y. And you might think, wow, less than, so look what way the arrow's pointing, and you might automatically select D. But for this one is a special instance because the variable y is on the right-hand side. And so if I'm going to rewrite this, I can rewrite this as y is greater than or equal to -5. And if that's the case, then I'm going to be circling letter C. A way you can check to make sure that your answer is correct for inequalities is figure out which way the arrow is pointing so that it's that dark shaded part. And I can fill in any one of these numbers along the number line in for y to figure out if the inequality is true. So I can figure out, I can go all the way up to 1. So let me put 1 in for y. 1 is greater than or equal to -5. And I can say that inequality is true because my arrow is covering +1. If I notice something down here for D, if I circle D automatically, just because I use the arrow trick you might have learned in elementary school, which only works for half the time, I can fill in any number. So say if I filled in -9, if I fill in -9 is greater than or equal to -5, that is not true. -9 is less than -5. So automatically, if I went back and double checked my work, I would say that D is wrong. And I wouldn't even go to A and B because of the open circle on those integers.